Lutz looks at the relationship between perception and reality through sound, sign, and sculpture. His work, Monolith, poses the possibility of engaging with the inner dialogue by a machine before it communicates with the outside world. Also, for everyone who's in Karachi right now, I'll be talking a little bit and introducing the projects and where they are at KB22 in Karachi this year. So if you're around, please do visit. This is the last weekend to go and visit all the sites and the exhibits before we end on Monday, November 14th. So without further ado, Andreas, please do take us through your work.
Yes, thanks, Faham. I hope everybody can hear me and see my screen as well. Yes, cool. Yeah, thank you for the invitation for this talk. And thanks for the words, Faham. It was really, so now I just had it with Faisal that I already returned now 1.5 weeks back to where I come from. But it was surely like quite an experience in Karachi, and I think it's and I think I can say for the other artists too that this kind of experience you won't make so much in your life, you know, like in this surrounding, in this kind of city, and really like this huge city with a lot of stuff going on. So it was truly like an experience, and thanks again for this opportunity. Yeah, I show at the Biennale in Karachi my work Monolith YW. It's a pretty new work, so it's the first time I really show it in public because I finished it quite in the moment before COVID then ran in, so it was never really on view yet. So I was really happy that it's possible to present it now, really the first time in public, and it's at the VM Gallery in. I don't know really what the area is, but like somewhere in Karachi, but really far from Beach Luxury, which is like a hotel where we lived. So it's quite in a different neighborhood, but although really pretty nice gallery. So I don't have too much time. I just want to explain quickly what the work is about. So I'm really in all my work, I'm really focusing on how on the communication between man and machine. So how it's possible to create some sort of metacode or like some sort of communication models between abstract machines and humans. You know, so how we can establish communication. So and in my works, I'm usually trying to develop some kind of semiotic system. So we as humans, we have, we made ourselves semiotic system based on letters so that we can write and communicate. And I try to rethink the same for machines, how we can make up or how we can analyze some sort of code that we can understand us in a way. And obviously, this is like a work in progress or like a discussion in progress. So it's not really a practical approach. So it's like a really conceptual approach. But I want to talk a bit later how this conceptual approach I always had through the years. Now this year I got to make it more practically through the help of AI and machine learning. First, I want to quickly show a video. That's really how the work is shown in VM Gallery. So in the middle, there's this big monolithical sculpture, and on two sides there are two light sources, which will illuminate the sculpture from both sides. So as I said before, I'm always trying to put on theories we have for the human language. I also try to put it on how machines could maybe deal with this thing, or like with the whole process once they have their own language. And in this case, I was really interested in this difference between the inner thought, like the primal thought, like which goes for humans. So you have an inner thought, but this can always change from what you really say. So it's like you first you have your own process when you think about something, or which is something is going on in your mind, but still it can really change from what you maybe communicate later at a later point to another human, or just as you write something down. And I was really interested in this gap between these two processes, and if it would apply to machines too. So that's why I came up with this idea to make a work about this primal thoughts, and if machine has maybe the same process. So then it raises questions like, is it because we always assume machines are really rational? So because that's how they until now are built somehow on a rational basis, but can machines like self-conscious machines, are they able also to fake, or maybe to make us believe in something else, and not just like as we believe they only can say truth, so like in a binary sense, so they only have right or wrong, or 0 or 1. So this question, maybe they can actively change their self-image of how we perceive them. So like a lot of questions lie in there. So then I built this sculpture. As I said, based on this semiotic system. So this kind of a language of the machine has, and I always built them in this case with 25 binary states, or like floating spaces, like with the help of actuators, and to make it visible on a fabric. So that's how I built my machines through the years. Anyway, just like to visualize somehow in an abstract way, to visualize that there's a communication from an abstract machine going on. In this case, the sculpture communicates all the time, so it like creates this primal thoughts, but then subsequent as this two different states. What I said before, these two light sources from left and right will give a total different appearance. But although the primal thought, so the movement of the machine, the sculpture, the communication stays all the same, but it will always look different from if you move around in the space, or if you see it from the front. So despite the movement always stays the same, so like the process of communication always stays the same, it appears completely differently all the time. So, and this is really like the work which is important, so that the third, let's say the third media, which is really used independent from the sculpture itself, or the lights, is the space. So because it always only can work in a space, so you can only experience the full perception of the sculpture in a space. So just a few pictures on how it's set in the M gallery. And I want to talk now quickly about this, what I said before about this process with a semiotic system, what really changed this year, what is now like a basis for a whole lot, or like a whole new approach for works, what I really use in different works from now. Because until now, I used always like this conceptual approach, like of creating a semiotic system, so the language of a machine, by trying to create some patterns, some different motions, some different animation, like and developing. So this could be like an alphabet for the machine. So as you can see here, so there are different different movements and different signs, different semiotic systems are created through this. But still, it was like a conceptual approach because in the end, I did it. So that was still not really truly machine created, or like really comes within from the machine, but still comes from a human brain, or like that's just what I think what could be the language of a machine, but still not the truly. It's still not the true language of the machine. So then I thought, how can really based on this idea, how can that a machine wants try to communicate with us and not only be seen or be treated as a servant or so. So, but based on this, how would a machine think? How it could maybe how it would make it possible to interact with us? So then I thought, okay, so there's the Unicode system, so which are all human readable signs. Or all human signs, but which also can be depicted on a screen or a computer. So this is like really the backbone of our whole semiotic systems, and they are stored in the Unicode system. So why can't I train an AI, artificial intelligence, a model with all the characters which are based in the Unicode system, and try to create models, so-called models, and then machine-generated semiotic systems, which I can later use really to drive motion or whatever. So as well, installations, what I have really, but based on how AI would really see human readable signs. And here you can see just like a short overview of how this looked after, like how I trained. So I divided, so I didn't put there are approximately 52,000 characters in the Unicode standard. But I divided it into blocks, so-called Unicode blocks. So approximately 1,000, 2,000 characters are for one model. So what you can see here from left to right are really the visualizations of how the AI saw the characters, and then put it in a new order, how it could see itself. So what we see here is like a interpolation through the model of the AI, what I trained with. This is like one model, so you can see you can see always the name. So the Unicode identifiers, which says from which to which character it was trained with, and then you get this really beautiful as well interpolation through a semiotic system, which is then used now as well for Monolith as well, but as well for my other works to make a real-time interpolation through the whole model. And you can see just like this is a zoom in and the models. This is the characters. Which are like just to zoom in these characters, where you can see that it aligned it in a new structure, but also builds interpolations or like little states in between characters, which means they're not binary characters anymore, but they're like a whole new world of characters which lie between two characters. So let's say for the Latin alphabet, before it was only A and B, so two binary states, but now between A and B can lie like whatever 80,000 characters, because I can really do really fine interpolation between these characters. So if you zoom in a bit more, you can see here from left to right. I don't know, because these are characters from the, I guess, Chinese character system. I don't know exactly now what the identifiers come from, but there you can see. And then with so like these really gradual interpolations between characters, and the red dots are now the points in the semiotic system where the character which was trained with can be recreated, like which it's like the optimal point from where we were coming from. But basically, and that's now I come to an end already. That's how I really drive now all my new works, and then I made really now this practical step forward. So coming from a conceptual approach in this, which was nice for the time, but now really now really what I have this idea how machines can really communicate. So now they really communicate based on human science, but how they see and how they could interact with us, but really through purely machine learned way. So by interpolation, by interpolations through the whole model. And this goes for I use this then for using with movement, as well for light, or as well for visualizations in a lot of different ways. So just like that's a bit the backstory of like the conceptual, but also like the technical approach, how I realize my works. And I think that's already it.
Thank you, Andreas. That was really interesting, especially to kind of learn more about, I think, the technical side of it, because you see this very interesting visual sculpture and there's almost an automatic response to it, but to kind of understand further what technicalities go behind it. And even the questions that you're raising around, I think, particularly about kind of imagining this dialogue, almost not as a dialogue, but as a monologue, and the reasoning for that, it would be really interesting to get into that later as well, I think, and what possibilities that holds about the questions we could ask.
Yeah. Sorry, Mahab, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah. So, Andreas, thanks for sharing this. So, just for this, for the sake of understanding for our audience, when we say we are training AI, right? What actually it means when we say training AI?
Well, what we do is we take an input, which is already in the world. Then we show it to a well, an AI is not something else like a code, like a code package which deals with input a bit differently, like we were used it to before. But basically, we show it to let's say like a module of software, and it can create from this real life input. It can create like systems or models, which can be used to generate output again based on this input from the real life world, but then can create like some kind of which for humans again think it's real, but then it's purely fake output, but it appears real. So that's what an AI can do, but it basically can generate fake worlds based on a real life input. But what I use now for my work is really just like this one single, like one really tiny sphere, or like one tiny aspect of AI and machine learning, what you can do.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Andreas, for explaining that. If you can also stop sharing your screen so that the next person will be able to. Thanks. So next up, we have Cosmic Tribe with Rayan and Aisha Ali. Cosmic Tribe explores a range of upcoming technologies through visual expression, campaign designs, and performances that address social issues in a unique way. Their work for KB22, Sentient of Lights, uses an experimental approach to scientific data. A character named Sentient educates the viewer on how light pollution harms living beings. This work is currently being exhibited at Sambara Art Gallery. I'll now hand it over to Rayan to take us through the work and share a little bit about their collective practice. Rayan, I'll share the slides for you. Sorry.
Yes. You may share this screen.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes. Perfect. So first of all, I would like to thank whole Karachi Biennale team for providing this amazing opportunity for our project, especially because the way my background is not from art community, but I'm working with an artist, Aisha Mubarak Ali. She is mainly working on fusion tech art, and I'm as a researcher or dark sky expert working on light pollution in Pakistan and addressing this issue. I'm part of International Astronomical Union and International Dark Sky Association as a delegate and advocate member. So when I started reaching out to public and talk about light pollution in City of Lights, Karachi, it was a hard message for people to understand because we live in a beautiful city of lights and people actually don't consider this as a pollution in Karachi, especially. So to give this message a new idea itself, bringing, because I do STEM outreach activities and campaign with students and do advocacy with policymakers and stakeholders in Pakistan, do arrange International Dark Sky Week and other activities under the umbrella of Cosmic Tribe. So as a collective of Cosmic Tribe, we worked on this project, which is with the name of Sentient of Light, addressing this issue of light pollution through wearable tech art pieces and design. And it contains an art performance, which is an interactive live art performance choreographed by Wahab Shah and other members in our team. There's a huge list of credit that we worked with. So when you talk about Sentient of Light, how we developed this character, when I started talking about light pollution, it was becoming a very hard message for me to address, and reaching out to the right audience was quite challenging because Pakistan having this issue of research deficit country and not enough data about this problem itself. And a lot of people are not really aware of this word light pollution in City of Lights, Karachi, and in general, and about dark sky itself. The word dark sky became quite complex for a general public in the audience. So when we started working on this and connecting this idea with humanity itself, because we are the one who are creating this light pollution itself. So I kind of become alienated in the society, and keeping that mind of alienation in the society and becoming an alien was a basic project that we did before this one, where I used to wear costume in public spaces for a cause to educate people about light pollution, where I use a smartphone and there is an application that we use to communicate with the people and the audience to aware about this issue. Later on, we decided to address other issues connected to this problem, which is Sentient of Lights, addressing how light pollution is affecting our biodiversity through translating their physiological effects of light pollution in this whole project. So you may move to the next slide and you may see the concept details and all the details overhead. Maybe it's not so clear because I wanted to add all the data, all the information. It contains a lot of research that we collected it together. Aisha worked on the wearable art pieces. She collected different sort of data and worked with texture mapping, AI, and ZBrush and different tools. Apart from that, from my background, I collected data for the species that are affected because of light pollution. So we chose 4 characters that are moth, firefly, bat, and zooplankton. How these species are affected in City of Lights, Karachi. When you talk about moths and fireflies, we don't ever see fireflies in Karachi or any places in Karachi. It's not a problem of Karachi, I would say. Most of the US and Europe, 99% of US and Europe actually is covered with light polluted areas. And Pakistan is still a dark country. This is the main thing that I wanted to highlight through this project, because we still have our dark skies in Pakistan, and creating an awareness through an art is an easy approach, and creating this awareness and educational outreach through medium of art was a big innovation in this project internationally, because no one has done it before in dark sky community itself. So when you talk about all these 4 species, we use their physiological effects of light pollution, translating through art in terms of using tech, where we use servo motors, microcontrollers, Arduinos, and all did programming, and mimic the same physiological effect, how all these species respond to the light. For example, when you talk about light pollution, how it is affecting a firefly or a moth, because moths get attracted toward light. So we mimic the same physiology through our programming, coding, and tech, which respond to the light. We use LDR sensors and mimic the same phenomena in our wearable art pieces. Apart from this, when you move, can you move to this, maybe next slide if you can? It will be easier for me to see all the other stuff. Yes, okay, perfect. So when you talk about fireflies, how fireflies communicate, because fireflies actually communicate through light. They mate through this communication. They use a system of flashes. There are total 80 number of languages they use in their flashing. They have different patterns, different languages they have. There are different kind of species. We collected all the data, scientific data that we collected, mimicking the same physiology. For example, they are unable to communicate. We use this LDR sensor in the same design as well, but mimicking through art performance, we use some body gestures and movement. For example, some of fireflies move in a J direction. They jump, or they simply give a dip when they want to ask for mating. It's like a mating between two fireflies when they want to communicate. So we mimic the same thing in our body gesture through an art performance that we did through this project. And when you talk about bat, they use one interesting phenomena, because they are they are dangerous in terms of when you use short wavelength light or frequencies. That is dangerous for a bat. They get confused, as well as because bats always want to stay in dark, and they want to hunt in the dark. To find its prey, they need to have some red light or some longer wavelength light to find its prey. So they have one more phenomena in their body, in their anatomy, that is echolocation. So we mimic the echolocation using ultrasonic sensors in our wearable art pieces, in our tech, where ultrasonic sensor calculate or define, observe the distance, if is there any object in the surrounding, and see and try to mimic the same physiology in terms of art performance as well. When you talk about zooplankton, so zooplanktons get attracted toward light, and they also have this what is that? They're important in terms of marine life. They play an important role in carbon cycle. It's an important thing when you are pointing out a city which is near to the beach or coastal area. So our coastal areas are also getting affected because of this light pollution itself. We chose all these 4 species according to the geographical location of Karachi itself, because when you talk about all these species, zooplankton, especially this marine life is connected with them. When you talk about fireflies, moths, and bats, all these are connected. So this is all the research. There are a lot of background story and how we collected all these data, and how we are mimicking through an art performance. Then it comes into reality, which we use 3D printing material as well as for our project, where you may see in this design, in this project, where Aisha worked on 3D design. She digitally worked on designs where she used different tools, AI, texture mapping, and so on. She's not here at the moment. She would have discussed about all these tools, what she has done using Blender and other 3D printing tools, which we use in this project, and collected all the data. And when you see this, you may find more details in this, because she used some tools that zoom in some of the features of these minor creatures that we see around us. Like some of the pieces are inspired by the eye of a firefly, and some of them are inspired by the physiology or anatomy of a moth. Maybe you can see in this picture right now. So she digitally designed all these things, and yes.
Yeah. So Rehan, I know the fact that there is a science and the data of the science,
Right.
which sort of talks about the realities of the light pollution. And I understand that then Aisha actually worked with the data and develop an aesthetic and creative manifestation of the data, which we see here. And this is a very extensive work, I would say, which have been done on sort of looking at the data and sort of visualizing it, and also trying to create some kind of visual aesthetics which respond to the data. And I think that's a really wonderful collaboration which happens between you as a scientist and an art and Aisha being as an artist. So quick question, how, I mean, as a scientist, do you feel we need to have more collaboration between art and science to talk about these scientific knowledge and make it more sort of accessible for
Yes. Okay.
for
So
the audience
this,
to really understand what's going on right now?
right. So this question is very, very important. You may notice that scientific community is quite a small. When I like, as I talk about dark sky community, I know everyone globally, and it's a very small community working on this topic. And a lot of people are not still aware of this issue. Like when you talk about this light pollution, maybe people who are living in US and Europe, there that is 99% light polluted, they still don't know about this issue. And uh, there is a gap, I would say, because there are a lot of non-STEM communities and people living around us, and it's a big community that we can work together as a collab. What I say in terms of collaboration, have some collective imagination on different ideas that are scientifically available. For example, when you talk about light pollution itself, a lot of people do these outreach activities and campaigns. They go for stargazing, they do like I do as well, create a footprint calculator, light pollution footprint calculator with the students, where students calculate all the lights and use a formula where they get the numbers and how much light pollution we are creating per year or something like this. But how we can translate it or use some art in it. For example, when you talk about this art itself, I think it's that's really important to have such kind of collaboration with art community, because it brings a lot of people, those who are unaware of such kind of issue, and tone down such topics which may require a lot of understanding when you talk about it, because nobody is ready to read all these research papers, and nobody likes to have this boring conversation. When you show it through visuals, that brings life to the science, and create this STEAM project where we use science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, that I'm calling it Dark Sky STEAM project. So it contains all these elements in this project, and I think a lot of people internationally also loving this concept. And there are so many tangents that we are touching in terms of using dramaturgy, choreography, physiology, design technique, concept, wearable art pieces, fashion design, so many elements that we are touching. And it was quite intense for us to see, and keeping the fine line between working on the cause and making it a clown or something, because we are making people to wear these pieces and keeping this element of science behind it and performing in the right manner, that was very, very important for this project. And using the same physiology and mimicking through this project was so much important, because for dark sky community or for the scientific research, they would like to see how people are learning through this objective that we have created from this art performance, actually. So yes, and I think if we still have time, we can have more
I
conversation.
think we're out of time, Ryan, but thank you so
Right.
much. And we can definitely get into it a little bit more
Sure.
during the Q&A part of the session. But I think it's very interesting. I'm sorry that Aisha couldn't join us today. I think she was having some connection issues.
Yes.
But the collaboration that both of you were able to pull off, and especially I think the performative element of it, which really allowed people to kind of engage with this research, and both sides of the work, something that's often very quantitative, such as like scientific data, as well as visual language that are also on its own can be sometimes inaccessible, but really bringing it together in this way where people not only learn about the species through something they're viewing, but actually experience it and interact with it. And I think, again, for those of you who are in Karachi or able to catch this talk before this weekend, there's 2 more performances that Cosmic Tribe will be doing, and it will be amazing for you to go and experience their work as well.
You.
So next up, we have our last presenters from KCR Studio, Janzeb and Murtaza. One second, I will just get up your slides in a minute. But just to introduce the artists, Karachi Community Radio is an independent online radio archiving and promoting the contemporary music culture of Pakistan. Their extensive work has seen them design audiovisual shows, broadcast live streams, and generate virtual productions. So their work for KB22, where Janzeb and Murtaza have both been heavily involved and sort of are an integral part of the project. It's called SAAS, and it invites the audience to think about technology and classical tradition and music. It is currently being exhibited at NJV High School, so please do go visit. And now it'd be great to sort of have Janzeb and Murtaza speak about their parts in this project and how they kind of brought their practices together for this work. If you just give me a minute and I will pull up your slides.
Yeah, while Maham is pulling up the slide, I have one quick question with Rehan as well. It'll be great to give a quick answer to that. Now, we see an intersection of art and science, and there is this notion of how the scientific data is converted into a visual interpretation, right? Do you anticipate that in your own practice as a scientist, you're going to engage more with the artistic community to tell more stories which are more accessible?
Oh, yes. I think my story, how I started working on this topic, living in the City of Lights, where we have a lot of issues, a lot of problems. Light pollution is not our problem, actually, when you talk about this scientific data. So when I started working on this topic was very, very challenging. And I thought it's a story of myself that because as a part of International Dark Sky Association, as also International Astronomical Union, as an ambassador representing Pakistan on this topic, I thought that it's me as an ambassador or something pioneering in this field and creating a new domains or working in this what I say untapped market that is still very new, and people can work on this through dark sky tourism, dark sky festivals. There are a lot of things that we can do in this field, lighting designs, policy making, education. But I felt art was the only way to communicate. that was the basic element I found is the only way to communicate with our audience, which is like in millions. You can only talk to them in the language of art. You cannot communicate with the scientific terminologies that I'm going to use or something like something which is beyond their understanding. So art was the basic language, which is a universal language that I use in my practice as well. And it actually really worked. And I shared all these storytelling and working with different influencers, especially Aisha as a collaborator in this project, helped me in this, what I say, in this mission, because I consider this as a challenge, because I see a lot of potential is there. Pakistan is a dark country, dark places. You may work on dark sky places, parks, and promote this country through a new, what I say, through a new medium itself. Because when you see
So,
globally, yes,
sorry, Rehan, was
yes,
just one clarity. When you say Pakistan is a dark country, what actually that means?
yes, okay, okay. The dark country, as in you may go to northern areas, Balochistan, Punjab. You may not find a lot of concrete jungles. It's only Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, which is like spreading like a wildfire and creating a light pollution in this country. Rest of it is still dark. You may not see a lot of urbanization in many places, and you may see a lot of natural reserves and places where you can see clear dark sky, or you may go for
Okay.
stargazing, all these
Yeah.
things. So I always use Pakistan as a dark country, and people think it's something. It's filled with dark sky places, I would say, potentially to have more dark sky places and park that can be heritage for the future itself, because in future it's going to be heritage. To see such places, people would love to go and see, and they are going to pay more price to see such places. And when you talk about dark sky tourism, it may consume more time to spend there, and it will work on such kind of things to promote tourism in a different way, because these are those people who are working in this domain. They feel Pakistan is the right country to do such kind of activities. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you, Ryan. I think, and that's a really interesting note to kind of leave that conversation as well, to think about, I guess, this connotation as like a positive one, and really the possibilities it holds for us to kind of think about the future as well, of preserving species and being able to access our environments in a different way. So I'm just going to share the screen for you, Janzeb and Murtaza, and then you can begin your presentation.
Okay, everyone can see the screen. Cool.
Yeah.
And can you guys see us?
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Hi everyone. Thank you guys for including us, for curating KCR, and all the wonderful people that have been part of it in making everything happen at our installation. So I think Mom has already given us a bit of an intro about my work related to KCR. Just a bit about me. I'm an audiovisual artist. I'm also a musician. Founded Karachi Community Radio around 5 years ago in Karachi. Very bootstrapped, just with a webcam, on a mission to archive the audio and music scene in the city. And my primary tool was live streaming at the time. And that's what my work kind of centered around, was using technology to document the music scene and the culture around in the city, so that because there was so much happening here in terms of electronic music, classical music, that a lot of people didn't know about. And I felt it was important to go on that journey and not be a driven individual trying to look for opportunities in a different country. So creating that space, which KCR has allowed me to experiment, and a lot of other creative artists like Murtaza and all of our collaborators in KCR, where we've been able to work on a project like SARS for KB. And Murtaza, you wanna?
Yeah, so my background is primarily in physics and finance, but I've been doing generative art for as long as I've probably around the last few years of school. And I started working with KCR about 2-3 years ago, I think, was our first project. And again, it was generative visuals for different artists and different themes that we were exploring at the time. Yeah, so that's me.
And that too, we met at another talk
Yeah.
where we were talking about generative coding and processing in general. But that's how our kind of journey began. And then we did a show, and we've been good friends since then. Next slide. Go to the next slide. So this is just an example of the kind of shows that we do. There's an entire virtual production from our studio, which, by the way, is entirely also self-funded. We don't rely on any grants and funds. We do like grants when they come up, but otherwise, this is a 3D environment where we invite artists, DJs, and then we record their sets, and then we've been showcasing a lot of the music through, the most cutting edge way of doing live streams and production. And the next slide, please. All right. This is just a screen grab from one of our recent productions. We were lucky enough to produce Boiler Room, Pakistan's first boiler room, where we finally got a chance to use our skills that we'd been honing in the live streaming department and production, and we produced some of the most talented artists. And again, we use technology, and that's why Boiler Room kind of approached us to play a very one of the main critical roles in making it happen. And just the next slide. So now we're going to kind of dive into our project and SARS, how it started, and I'll let kind of Murtaza take the lead on this.
Sure. So about 6 to 8 months ago, me and Janze were sitting and brainstorming ideas, and we started listing all the things that kind of bothered us about the modern internet culture and the role that technology has in our lives, and how important it is to maintain things like privacy. So we were going to explore themes around like surveillance capitalism, privacy, techno-feudalism, and so many other things. And the conduit we were going to use for it was a rubab, actually, that would play itself. So we imagined that we would build a rubab that actuated itself and played melodies that we would either program into it or drive via a generative process, or an AI process, which means that we would write a piece of code which would tell the rubab what melodies to play. And as we explored the different themes further, we realized that we were already, like, just the rubab part of it, just the instrument part of it was a really concrete, significant idea in and of itself. And it was quite overpowering. And so we decided to just focus on that. And in the process, we kind of whittled it down into a project which was centered around, how well can we make a machine play an instrument, and not just any instrument. It's a folk instrument from Chitral. That's sorry, I skipped a step there. While we were trying to build the system for rubab, we decided to do our first prototype on a Chitrali sitar, which is the instrument we've decided to use for the final installation. While we were trying to prototype for the Chitrali sitar, we found out what a complex task it would be. Now, I'm not a mechanical engineer. In fact, no one on our team is a mechanical engineer. So we were all kind of doing a little bit of R&D, in other words, to make it work. And we had to go through 4 or 5 prototypes to make it work just for the Chitrali sitar. and there was a lot of missteps along the way, but our final product also surprised us because it's really reliable, it's robust. Only one motor has failed since we started on the installation. It's been playing consistently.
And just a bit of a background on the sitar, right? It's from the northern region of Pakistan, and it's still made in Chitral. This particular Chitrali sitar that we've been using was hand built in Lower Chitral. And we had a person, because it's so delicate, we had someone hand carry it all the way to Karachi, because they don't let us, they wouldn't let us ship it. Like, the people who made it were like, we're not going to let you ship this.
Yeah, we're not.
We're not taking it. But what was interesting and what caught my attention with the sitar as well was because the thing that it was, it's an instrument that's played in every other house in sitar, like Chitral, but in Chitral, and it's in itself a community-driven instrument where all these different families play together, and the sound in itself is so soothing. Like, you understand why every other house kind of,
and it's not too complicated to play either.
So like, for anyone, the entire sitar has 5 strings. 2 are the ones that are actually played together, and 3 are drone or sympathetic strings. So you kind of strum them, and the other 2 strings are played. The entire
sorry, Janze. Janze, we can't hear you properly. Can you come closer to the mic, please?
Okay, sure. So what all, can you guys still hear me properly?
Yes.
Better? Okay.
Yeah.
So the entire neck is 1 scale. So interestingly, wherever you play, you're also in scale, you're playing and it's tuned, it will sound good. And then they also have their own kind of tunings, like the Chitrali sitar has its own kind of scale, which has a lot of minor tones, which aren't not whole steps in a note. So that was what kind of caught our attention. And also,
can we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah. And then over the year, we kind of, worked on different prototypes of this instrument. We worked with Irfan Taj, who's also a Chitrali musician.
He also makes his own instruments.
Yeah, he also makes his own instruments, and he played, he was very integral in terms of helping us figure out how to, play the instrument, even acquiring it, and
how do we actually construct the mechanisms that play it. So Irfan was, as from a mechanical perspective, we just thought we had to press the strings, but then Irfan is like, no, you have to press it this way and at this exact location with this much pressure and so forth. So a lot of that fine tuning, was actually Irfan that informed the sensitive aspects of the instrument, and not just the mechanical aspects of the instrument, sorry, not just the music.
So there was like a lot of research and development that happened. This is the version that we have, is the 5th iteration of the sitar, the one that we finally have installed, and it only started functioning probably like a few weeks before the installation.
Well, it was
for a month. It was functioning, right? But like, we were like, okay, now we're kind of happy.
The final prototype was
we're happy with we can go ahead with this for sure. But like the previous slide just kind of shows, so with our installation, specifically with SaaS, where I'm just going to talk about the more visual side of things as well, that the goal was for the audience to understand what's happening as well in terms of what they see, and not be too abstract with our installation. Because for the public, it's still a new idea of what it means to bridge tech and arts, and how can that be possible. So we kind of broke our installation in different layers, where one is the SaaS, the sitar itself, where you can physically inspect it in terms of how it's playing. The second is like, we've got these projection screens, and the ones that are behind the sitar are kind of looking at the guts of the instrument to show the mechanics, to highlight that in a very X-ray-like vision, for which we're also using a CCTV camera there. The side panels are what's visualizing the sound, what you can't see. So for the audience to kind of also feel what the instrument is playing visually. And so for that, we're using a spectrogram, which is running live. So as you can see over here, the left one is kind of listening into the instrument live and generating the visual on these side panels using this program called Touch Designer. And so the idea is that the person who's visiting SARS should feel that they're inside that instrument and exploring this space, which is creating music and serenading everyone, but at the same time, it's kind of not played by a human. And what does that mean for, for the individuals? So yeah, we can go on the next slide. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the key design elements of the sitar is actually how exposed we made all the wiring and the mechanics. So we purposefully chose clear acrylic, and we purposefully chose to demonstrate, where the electricity is coming in, and like the two computers that are controlling the actual the motors and the motors themselves, which are fretting the strings and strumming them. And the point was we wanted to remove as much of the magic and illusion as possible, because and even though we did that, the first thing people think, especially children, when they walk in the room is like, oh, there's a ghost playing this instrument. I think they were slightly biased from some other exhibits they saw, but and that was really fun for us to see, is that in fact there's this famous quote by a science fiction author which says that any sufficiently advanced technology seems like magic. And so we were pleased to have that effect. But that said, yeah, so we chose to expose all the wires. We want people to see exactly how it works. You can see all the lights that are blinking each time a motor activates. You can see the little power brick where all the electrons are coming in to power the instrument. We can go to the next slide. And yeah. Oh yeah, one other thing I'd like to mention is the music for the sitar. You can jump in whenever you want, Janzeb, was mainly composed by Irfan and Janzeb. And all along the way, we had a few teams exploring the idea of generative music and AI composed music for the sitar.
And we did some tests.
We did some tests with a mild amount of success. So one of the future goals is we can close the loop completely and have this sitar that comes up with its own melodies. Maybe somehow it can get a response from the audience to optimize the melodies it creates, and then it can just be its own closed loop device that can go on its own tours and collect its own royalties, hopefully not.
And throughout our installation, we've also done a bunch of experiments, right? So testing with AI, where the program listens in and then plays back music. So we did that successfully, where it would play notes back, but it was taking a longer time for that to actually work in a real-time setting. But that's just like kind of right now in optimization and figuring out how that could be streamlined. And then other than that, we've also been exploring how does instrument like the Chitrali sitar, which is mechanized, works with an actual musician. So Irfan Taj, played live with the SARS, where he was playing the rubab and the sitar was accompanying him as an instrument. Second performance that we had, where I experimented with live coded music, and I was also kind of in control of the instrument. So layering it with different kind of synths, which were generating live in the space. The last and final was very recently, where Arthur Panchwani, who's a producer and a DJ, produced an entire piece, and the SaaS was interacting live with his DAW, the audio production software. So he was creating generative music, and he was picking notes from the range of scales, and the program was picking the notes for him. And in that too, Irfan was also accompanying as a on Rubab. So it was very interesting so far, and we've had people dance around the SARS. We've had these kids sit in circles around the instrument. We've had people lie down,
people meditate
for hours. Like something
we've had our
so doing this, like they were for an hour. I was like, wow. But yeah, we've been in there for too long, so we kind of like to go out for a bit. But it's very nice to be in there.
Yeah, I guess a final note would be that I think we're close now to making something which can try and approximate what it means to be a musician, right? Like a musician's creativity.
By the way, like what were the biggest challenges that you kind of personally faced with the mechanics? Like with the pressing or the materials that you kind of experimented with?
Yeah, so
or we're out of time.
What's up, Hassan?
Yeah. I think we have a lot of good questions.
Okay. Sure, we can jump into this.
Maham?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, I think for everyone who was able to experience your work as well, it definitely did provide sometimes an escape, sometimes that magic, and also, an interesting sort of look in different ways into what the process was, through seeing both the installation as well as the performance aspect of the work, which was really cool. So we're open to questions now and comments from people who are joining us today, and we can also get started. Actually, I wanted to ask a question of Andreas first, just to start with, that can you talk a little bit about, I guess, this mode of choosing the monologue for the machine? Because, often when we think about this idea of having a dialogue between machines and human beings, it's already sort of inherently building this relationship of the machine in regards to the human, or serving the human in some way, or, just in tandem in some way. Could you express a little bit about, I guess, why you chose this idea of the monologue and for the machine to have a monologue?
Yeah, that's exactly what you said, Maham. So I think, but I think this is shifting also right now a bit, but, right from I would say maybe from the beginning of the internet, where machines also could be seen as that they have some sense of that they do something, or, like maybe we can go even more back in time and think about how machine was always seen. And machines always are seen as, servants, or like that they can do tasks for humans, but like they're not, like they were never equal. So we could say we were always really racist against machines, let's say. And at one point, I think that was just for any reason interesting for me, that that we take machines really purely equal. So I don't want to raise this issue, or like I don't want to get into this discussion on when can machines become smarter than us. So because that's like a whole different topic. But yeah, at this point, I was just like interested in how can we treat a machine equal, or how can we create like an equal level between humans, machines, or between machines and animals, whatever. So like just have an equal level. And then I think just like one step towards it is that because I like just like from a technical standpoint or so, I did a lot of interactive work as well when I was, or like 10 years before. And I think everybody did. When you grew up with the internet, then that's the first thing what you do. So you create maybe interactive applications, you create interactive uses, and you use the machines as not a caretaker, but like some kind of a surrogate for this. But then I really started to create my installations and sculptures as that the machines are completely autonomous, like humans are as well. So you can't just like, you can't just like go in there and wave a bit with your hands, or like, like to do childish things with machines. So I just try to take them serious, and that they have feelings too. Although they're super abstract, I understand this. So I don't know. I think it might sound always really abstract when I maybe talk about this, but yeah, that's just how I can explain it. So just to take machines also serious, and that's how you can see maybe on this sculpture too. So that it has some kind of aura. Often I hear this from the audience when they see my sculptures, so that they have some kind of aura, and you feel that there's like with humans, so that you can't just like interrupt, or you don't go just super near to somebody else, because it might be too private for him. So, and I think so it's like a kind of respect, you could say, as well, towards the machine.
Thank you, Andreas. I think that's also a really unique way, I guess, for us to think about the possibilities of interacting with machines, and even in terms of the use, I think, because you're really pushing the imagination of the machine in this work, and I think in your other works as well. We have a question for KCR from one of the attendees. So in exploring how the digital interacts with and perhaps encroaches on the human, have you built a framework for yourselves to keep art sacred?
Okay, for ourselves. I really like the word sacred, because that is a tough question. I think largely it's up to people who are interacting or observing the art. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's up to the people to decide what they keep sacred, right? Whoever's observing or interacting with the piece of art or the music itself. And I think what's sacred has changed over time. So, and it's changed with different technologies, and it's changed with not since the invention of the printing press, or and then early 90s, I guess, or 80s, 70s, 60s, digital art comes around, right? So I don't know. I think it's really up to the individual to decide for themselves what is sacred, right? I don't think you can keep something like art or creative sacred through any mechanism.
But for a human, sacred is also the experiences, their life, things that kind of make up, which gives meaning to things, right? And that's how they can come to those, because the tools have always even changed, right? Also, even as an instrument, robotic pianos were there back in early 19th century, right? Where they would play on its own, and they'd already done it in a very mechanical way. And the same concept was used in these toys which play music as well. And what we're doing is kind of similar, but using software.
And it's new, right? I mean, it's an addition. So
and
I think
since that time, there's still music, right? The world is still kind of.
So what's kind of historically been sacred is kind of still sacred. This is something, it's an addition on top, and I guess it's for people to decide whether or not they will count this as sacred. I think that's a fair enough answer. I don't know what kind of mechanisms you can create.
Great, thank you. Just to, I guess, extend that further in terms of how, you were sort of imagining the project and how people would experience it. Was your purpose mainly to kind of ask these questions around the dialogue, I guess, or were you, intending for some purpose where either the machine or tradition in this sense kind of takes precedence?
Well, for us, it was more about, how far can we take this in software and in the mechanisms, right? How well can we approximate what a human can do, and maybe how far or how can we do some things that a human can't do? So again, we're just trying to extend.
But also, yeah, conceptually as well, I think that's been.
And then draw the parallel, right?
Yeah, and also see, of course, what are people thinking? Because we've had those questions, right? And we've had very different experiences with everyone who's been there. That already mentioned that, we've had people who've danced, and then there was this one person who came the other day and was like, for some reason, this instrument sounds like this music sounds very cold. And is it because a machine is playing? And it's not like bringing me alive, or like it's not kind of creating that spark in me. It's putting me to sleep.
Yeah, and people wonder, it's like, are you trying to replace musicians? And we're like, no, we're not.
Yeah,
because it's actually one thing that people are missing. It's like there's so much more to the music than just the instrument and the player. It's the context and the environment. And I could play a song on the guitar that's probably it's a very different thing if probably not that great, but than when a professional musician playing it, right?
Interrupt you, but there's a couple of actually more questions for you. Faisal, Andreas, did you want to add something?
Go ahead, Andreas.
Yes, I just want to add something to you guys. What I think too, or like about this question of being sacred and stuff, because although it might seem now that I say AI is like good or whatever, or like it leads us into the future, but I'm really critical about it. In fact, so I'm using it as a tool, but I think until now, and I can't see how this will change in the next 100 years. And I had this like really, I can say really practical thing from Karachi, how much it touched me when the Fakir played on the evening night, because then I thought it's really just as you guys said. So it's just like the setting, but also knowing where he comes from, that he put his life into it. So, and like this whole idea of that a human dedicates this life to it, and the history where it's coming from, how the process is. So like there's so much story around it, and then it's still hard to believe or like envision how this could be done by a generated thing or by a machine stuff, because until now, and that's what my project is about as well. So it's still based on what a human brain first envisioned, or which comes like through 8,000 years of history in Pakistan, or like in the world. So, and I think this is all non-verbal aspects, but these are things which are super important and which like people sense when they come to installation of yours. Obviously, it's like well produced and well done, and you recreate something, but in the end, you recreate something which is done by humans. So of course, and then people get reminded of this idea, and I think that's what they would call sacred. So because they're reminded of a thing they saw maybe once from a human, or like so they I think that's an important thing as well. Like the sacredness ideas.
Yeah, no, and I think just to extend that further, I think I love what you said, Andreas. You use technology as a tool, right? And I think if we look at all the tools which available to us as an artist, as a storyteller, the printmaking, the visual arts, right? The sculptures, they all have this different sort of sensibility and mediums to talk about our core sort of ideas, which we want to tell that story, right? Which has a sometimes very sacred, sometimes has a very symbolic representation, sometimes has a very sort of inner sort of journey about the ideas which we have been trying to deal with, right? And I always wonder, and I would like to have this question to all of you guys. There's always this question of, to me, AI, machine learning, generative art, These are all contemporary mediums, which allows us to create a contemporary narrative, which has its own sort of sensibilities and processes, and even lingo, right? And I'm wondering, is it fair enough? Is it a right sort of connotation or a sort of conversation for the audience that, you know, these new emerging technologies, when we talk about machine or a computer, we always tend to feel it's the machine which is doing everything, but that's not the case, right? It's, you know, we are using machine, we are using AI to actually create something which we like to talk about or passionate about, right? And it sometimes have a same complicated processes, right, which we have in any sort of other mediums which exist so far in the visual arts or in the art industry. And sometimes there's a question of, you know, this is machine, this is computer, this is, and I'm just wondering, what is your take as an artist, as a storyteller? Is it, what is your process? Do you feel you create first your emotional and your narrative first and look at the technology to tell that story in a way that it resonates with you as a person and resonate with the audience? Which comes first? The form come first or the process come first?
Who's going to answer first?
I'll ask this question to Andreas first, and then we'll go Rehan, and then yeah.
Really nice. Yeah, for me, it's funny because we had this topic as well a few weeks before at a different talk. And so for me, I feel exactly the same like you, Faisal. So we live in a time, you know, like in the 400 years ago, they had canvases and color and, you know, like really basic tools. So now we live in a time, these are our tools, what we use. So obviously technology and now AI, advanced technology, but most likely in 20 years will be something else. So, and that's okay because, you know, so you have to, or you work always with the tools, or like we as maybe work as artists working in the media field, we use media which are current in our times. But what I really think and what I really learned now through the years doing this for a while, and I think this is really like a constant thing, that first what you do as an artist, so like really the form and the process. I would add like the narrative. Maybe that's what you mean by process as well into it. So, but I think the most important thing for me, at least, is because it's a really individual thing. But like you have to find, or like for me, it's an expression of something which really interests me. So that's why it's. Otherwise it would be just a production of ideas of somebody else and so, and I think this is constant through the centuries, that people who did art, they were really interested in a topic which is like for themselves maybe interesting, and they would have done it independently from if somebody would see it or not. So I think that's the most important thing, and I see this as a form of discussion. So I see always my work as a statement of myself, you know. So I put all these thoughts into it, and then I present it like in a physical form or in a visual form. But this is like somehow I feel this is my part to contribute to society in a way. So because it creates the basis for stuff what we do right now, and talk about topics which are important for us. And it's not, for me, obviously, clearly it's important to create stuff. That's really important. That's for sure 50%. But for me, really, at the same, like the same importance has the dialogue and talking about issues. And I think that's what Ryan said before. So that's already going on a lot in the academia and in the scientific field, but clearly that's maybe not, or that's only really limited to these people who really understand, because you have to be really deep into a field maybe to understand what you talk about, or that you can understand somebody else. And I think this is like really the power, not only maybe of art, but of maybe abstraction, but then also that you can reach emotion. So, you know, that you, because humans are not just built of that they can understand information, or we're not only done for, and that's really like still and will be for a long time the difference between us and machines. So we are capable of having so many different senses, and it's not only like the rational mind, so that we can read something or that we understand text, but also sometimes it's more when I go to a theater, for example, and there's a really good actor, and you can see already, or you can feel already, if he comes on the stage, that he has some kind of aura. So he doesn't need to talk anything, but I think that's just, you know, or that you can, that you have on a non-verbal way, or on a level which is not describable somehow, but which we maybe could say this is like the sacred thing, what we talked about, or the just some things we don't have even words for it. So maybe some call it religion, or some call it nature, or some call it inspirement or something else. But I think that's what at least like drives me to create. And that's like, you know, independent from all, obviously my work is really technological. So, and I use a lot of technique, but I really, in the end, it really doesn't matter what kind of tool to use, because most important thing is the idea and what you want to say.
Yeah, cool. Totally makes sense. Yeah, Rehan?
Yes, I would like to. Yes, so I would like to add a lot of things into this topic, because a lot of astronomers, scientists, researchers are already using these tools, AI, Python programming languages, all these languages for their data to collect for astronomy, especially in astrophysics. When you learn about radio astronomy, all these data are collected and converted into some diagrams, and translating through in art is actually one kind of a medium that artists are using. I would say using this new form, which is not only STEAM, but a stream, where you use this science, technology, research, engineering, arts, and maths together, create this stream, which is going to be a part of a metaverse, actually, where we are going to have this immersive experience. All these people collectively work on these kind of projects, where you use new tools that are emerging right now, especially when you talk about coding, programming, AI, and so on. A lot of tools are there. It's up to us how we use it, how we interpret, and how we communicate through them. I think it's a beautiful story that you have already done it through this collective imagination. I'm so blessed to be a part of this KB 2022. I love it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, well said. Yeah, Jahanzeb, Murtaza.
Sorry, yeah, we missed the last 5 seconds of your speech because of some connection issues. So could you please repeat the very last thing you said?
Well, I was just referring to the idea of, you know, when we use technology as a medium, as compared to printmaking, as compared to sculptures, as compared to creating a painting, right? Every medium of contemporary times, artists respond to the tools of the contemporary times, right? So for you, when you use technology as a medium, how do you sort of you envision the form first, or you envision the process first? How technology influenced the work?
Right. So for myself, you see, technology gives you another, like as everyone said already, actually gives you another kind of kind of tool. So for me personally, sometimes there's a concept or an idea, and then I find a way to express that using the tools I already know how to use. So the idea precedes the medium or the execution in a way. Sometimes I'll see a new kind of technology, like in fact, I'll use John Zabe as an example. Is this new iPhone can record 3D, do 3D point scanning, and that's a really interesting tool. And so in that case, the tool inspired John Zabe to do other kinds of works. In that case, the technology inspired some kind of creativity in John Zabe. So I guess it's a mix of both. And I think that's the way it's been, and that's the way I think it will continue to be. I don't think it's can get me simple.
Yeah, I kind of totally agree in terms of like even for myself, it's usually the idea in itself as well, like what you want to do, like establishing that, and then you see what tools you have to kind of solve that, or figure out a way to get there. So growing up, I used to paint and sketch a lot, and I used to build things as well. And then as I learned new ways of doing things, I did the same thing but in different ways, and that evolved. And interestingly, like that's why I was gravitated towards learning how to program. So I taught myself how to code, and I've taught myself a lot of things that way. So teaching myself how to learn new skills and tools has helped me to keep growing and learning new skills that have allowed me to create interesting things. And that kind of also inspires me in a way, because I don't get bored with the same kind of skill. Like I'm always collecting skills but also growing, and that also opens up communities, that also opens up these amazing experiences that lead you to different places that can inspire you.
And technology is evolving, it's
very quickly, so you can be very on it. Like if you're on it, then you can.
It's not like there's a new paintbrush invented every day, but there's literally a new AI model. There's like GPT-3 is invented, and then just a few weeks ago there was this AI that used to sketch things based on some kind of text input that you put in, and then people started playing with that tool. I forget what it's called. I think Andreas probably knows. And
yeah, no, thanks a lot. Ma'am, do we have any more questions?
We do have a few more questions, but we're also out of time. So I think I can leave the questions as maybe reflections, and I can go over them, because I think what's really interesting about what all four of the artists were saying right now is that, when we're thinking about navigating our contemporary world, or thinking about sort of utilizing these new mediums and technologies, it's really about the questions that we're asking. And I think that also changes how meaningful, or how what utility these technologies can have, and maybe also take them out of the hands of, some of the things that make them seem sinister, or some of the systems that kind of control them already. So I feel like it's really interesting that all three of you are posing these questions with different themes and sort of different results as well, but really showing all the different ways in which we can engage and experience and participate also in this tech. So we had a few more questions, and I'll kind of just leave them to reflect, and they're actually mainly for KCR. So we have someone who's asking about what does it mean to sort of build this positive relationship with tradition, and how do you think about this in context of your initial concerns with technology in terms of capitalism and surveillance? So I feel like we've kind of touched upon this a little bit also already. And then there's somebody else who's wondering about the possibilities of kind of using this kind of music, or using this tech also in education, and bringing it to school children, which I think has been a really interesting part of who is experiencing the work at KB22, that we've had a lot of these students come in to experience all the different kinds of work. And, you know, even though there's a lot of complexity in both the conceptualization and the mediums, there has been, you know, an accessibility in terms of creating a reaction or provoking a certain engagement with it. So I'd just like to thank everyone who is here with us today and all of the panelists who joined us: Andreas, Rayan, Janzeb, Murtaza, Faisal. And, you know, this talk will also be up to share later on, so you can share within your networks. As I mentioned, we have another live one tomorrow on Ali Imam at NJV School for those of us who are able to come. But thank you very much. And I won't say hope to see you soon because I don't know, but, you know, maybe see you soon.
Definitely see you soon tomorrow.
Yeah, see you.
Ciao, guys. It was nice. Take care.
See you all at
Bye.
our live performance as well. Bye bye.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Bye.